Hey everybody, you're watching Reese Rides. In this video, I'm going to do kind of an off-the-cuff comparison between my 2016 YZ450FX and this 2018 Husqvarna TX300. I'm making the switch from a 4-stroke to a 2-stroke, and in this video, I'm going to tell you about some things that I've noticed right off the bat that are just a little bit different, switching between the Japanese 4-stroke bike and this Austrian-owned 2-stroke bike. Even though I haven't really ridden it yet, just taking it apart, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've noticed. So stick around. So in this video, I'm not going to get into why I'm making the switch between a 4-stroke and the 2-stroke. I might do that in another video, but I know that that's going to be a huge debate among the community. But for this video, I'm just going to talk about the things that I've noticed making the switch. So in case if anybody's making the switch from a Japanese bike over to one of these European bikes, or you're making the switch from a 4-stroke to this type of 2-stroke, these are some of the things that you can kind of expect. So we'll start from the top. So let's just talk about control. So obviously I've got the Magura hydraulic clutch, so that is really nice. Obviously I've got the cable operated clutch over here on the YZ. So that's really cool. I definitely like that. It's a little bit smoother of a clutch pull, and it's the same force or feedback all the way through, which is really nice. And so that brings me over here to the Magura front brake. So this felt really squishy to me at first, but what I realized in my test ride was that you actually have a lot of resolution to your braking power. So it's not all or nothing. And I never realized that it was closer to all or nothing on this bike. But just when I rode this bike, you definitely have a little bit more control over how much front brake you're applying. So moving on to the bars. So one thing I noticed right off the bat not really when I rode it, but when I was comparing these two bikes, is that the bend on the stock Husqvarna bars is very, very low. And I looked it up, and the stock bend on the Husqvarna bar as compared to, say, the stock bend on a KTM bar is like 39 millimeters rise from the bottom of the tube to, I think it's right around where the grip would be. It's like 39 millimeters on the Husqvarna, but on the KTM, the stock bar is like 62 millimeters. So you get like another 23 millimeters of rise, which is almost another inch of rise on the KTM bars. So that seemed kind of weird to me. So the next thing is the forks. So the forks are the WP AER 48 air forks. So the right fork has the clicker on top. So you got the clicker that you can kind of just spin with your fingers. It's a little triangular type shape thing, and you can turn that to do all of your compression adjustment on top. And the right fork also has rebound adjustment on the bottom, a standard clicker that you would put your screwdriver up into and twist. So you can't do that one by hand. And then the left fork actually has a Schrader valve, so you can control the actual spring in there. So that's how the spring is controlled, is with air pressure. And so that was kind of interesting. There is no compression or rebound adjustment on the left fork that I have found, so I could be wrong there. So moving on to the chassis. So one thing that I really liked about this bike and why I was kind of excited about getting a Husky as opposed to a KTM is these grips right here. So I know the KTM has kind of some grips built into their rear fender, but these handles on the composite subframe have been really handy just getting it on and off the stand at this point. So I really like that. That is really nice. The body work is really interesting. So this whole panel here is held on by 2 slide clips here that are in the tank. So you have to slide those on this way. And then you have 3 pop locations in here. So it's essentially just a push pin, a barb that you just snap in. So you can yank it out and then snap it in. And so I went ahead and took Jay Clark's advice and put a little bit of grease on those to make those easier to pop in and out. Now this panel over here on this side is the same, except it actually has a 6 millimeter bolt in the bottom that holds just the bottom in. And so that leads me to another thing, is you're gonna find just transitioning between the Japanese bike to this Austrian-ish bike, there are some different fasteners. So I've noticed I've come across a 7mm, which I've never encountered before, a 6mm, which was very rare, and I noticed that because it's in places that you actually want to get to regularly. Like for instance, the side cover, it's a 6mm. So that's the only reason I know that they're around. And then there's also a 13 at some point. So I think your axle blocks, you adjust with a 13 for the set screw. And then there's one other location, I think I found a 13mm, which is kind of strange. But one thing that's nice about a lot of these fasteners is they have a secondary method to them. So what I mean by that is in your traditional hex bolt, you just have a hex pattern on the outside, and if you round that off, you're kind of hosed. You might have to use a pair of vice grips or something to clamp onto that and undo it. So most of these, if not all of these hex fasteners that I have encountered on this bike have also a Torx recess in the top of them. So a lot of these 8mm bolts that adjust your purchase for your clutch and your front brake have a Torx on the top of them. So that's kind of convenient. One annoying thing about that is that if somehow that bolt gets kind of cocked in that hole for whatever reason, I think I have my perch mounted near the bend of the bar, so it makes the actual clamping mechanism a little bit off. But anyway, the wall thickness of my socket prohibited it from getting on that bolt all the way, so I had to use the Torx. So the annoying part about that is now you have to carry your Torx also, but it is nice to have that secondary method. I really appreciate that. So some other things that are going to be specific to my situation is that now I've got a carburetor. So now I am worried about jets and things like that. So the manual does have a table that gives you jet suggestions based on altitude and temperature. So that's a pretty good starting point, and that's where I've gone so far. And a lot of my jets came with the bike, so I really just have to anticipate what ride I'm going to be doing and then change those jets out. Another thing is a petcock. So I don't have a petcock on the YZ. It's fuel injected, it's just always on. But when you lay it over, it doesn't puke out fuel. So in this bike, it has a petcock, so I'm gonna have to remember that if I lay it over, I need to turn that off, otherwise I'm gonna be puking fuel. The upside to having that petcock is I also have reserve, which is nice. So if I ever do really run that far down on fuel, then I've got a reserve. And it's a bigger tank. This is a 2.6 something gallon tank, and this is only a 2-gallon tank. So I do have more gas, although arguably it might only get me the same distance as the Yamaha, which is about 60 miles or so, was pretty safe depending on the riding conditions that I could get with these 2 gallons. So I expect to get around the same range with this until maybe I put Electron or maybe a smart carb or something on here. So the next thing is changing gear oil. So on the Yamaha, the manual recommends that you change your engine oil every, I think it's like 7 to 10 hours, might be up to 12 hours of ride time. So that may be for race conditions. But regardless, the interval to change the gear oil in this, keep in mind that only lubricates the bottom half of the engine and not the cylinder, is 20 hours. So you can ride for 20 hours on an oil change in this bike before you then have to change the gear oil again. The one thing to that is that your cylinder is going to be subject to all the debris and things that get sucked through your air box. So it's going to be imperative that I change my filter, or at least clean my oil or my air filter after every ride and put a new one in there, or a new clean one anyway. Since I haven't gotten to ride this thing and it is going to be a week or so, I am taking the opportunity to put all the protective gear on it. So you can kind of see I've already got the swing arm guard over here, and I've got some full wrap fork guards coming. The bark busters I have out of the frame, but I'm just waiting on the bar ends. I got the bark busters with the bars, or with the bike, but the clamps didn't fit the bike. So I ended up having to get those at the shop here. I've also got all the weird size tools that I didn't have before, like a 6mm socket, a 6mm wrench, a 7mm wrench, probably a 7mm socket too, and a bunch of these little Torx that I want to carry in my toolkit as well. So the bike did already come with the P3 carbon fiber pipe guard and the P3 carbon fiber skid plate and a little OB linkage guard that kind of attaches to that skid plate. So that was already on there, which was nice. And the FMF Turbine Core 2 spark arrestor. So all of that's covered. And now I just have to worry about protecting all the rest of it. So I've also got an ignition cover coming. So like a plastic protective cover that goes over that. And a clutch cover protector over here. I took all that stuff, or at least some of that stuff, off of this bike because I'm selling it and I wanted the buyer to be able to see the frame and the swing arm to know that they were covered pretty much the entire time that I had it. So this bike is going away and this bike is going to stay. So those are my initial impressions, just having brought the bike home and started to tinker on it a little bit. And I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you all in the next video.